Ruin My Childhood.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Ruin My Childhood, the podcast where you decide if some things are better left in the past. I'm Mike.
And I'm Kat.
And what are we going to be talking about today, Kat?
The Mask of Zorro.
Zorro. I don't know why I said it like that. That did not work, right? I remember really liking this movie, but I'll let you go first. What do you remember about this movie?
Oh, this was huge. There was so much advertising for this. I feel like everyone and their whole family saw this movie and then purchased it after.
We didn't purchase it, but we saw it. I think we saw it in theaters, and I think we actually rented this movie multiple times, and we definitely watched it every time it was on TV. Is there anything that stands out to you though? Any scenes?
A lot of fighting and the scene where he's like having a sword fight with her, and then like looking back on it, he cuts her clothes off, which is
that's what I remember.
Horrible.
That's what I remember.
Yeah.
This movie came out in July of 1998, so I was 9 going on 10. You were already 10, and I'm at that age. I was at that age where I'm a little young to be liking girls, right on that cusp. But I remember being somewhat intrigued by that scene, not necessarily like understanding what it
Too
was
young
yet.
for a crush, not young enough to not be rubbing one out to a grown
No.
woman.
You can't say that on our podcast. It's a PG.
Can I not?
No, that's a bit much. No, I mean, I'm young enough to not really comprehend what's going on biologically, going like, oh, that is interesting, and young enough where I was still at that age where it's like, oh, girls are kind of gross. Like, obviously there were little crushes, but not like super into like girls on a physical level, but I still was intrigued by
So what you're saying is you're a boob guy.
Yeah. No, and Catherine Zeta-Jones is a very beautiful woman, very pretty, so I just remember that. But I remember really liking this movie, and then of course, right after this, just a couple years later, Shrek and Shrek 2 came out, and Antonio Banderas was in that, and Spy Kids.
That's
like
so weird that like that's the connection you make.
Well, no,
Shrek.
it's just because he was Puss in Boots, and then he did the Spy Kids, so it's like he had been around, like he had done Desperado and whatnot.
I felt like that was the end of his career.
No, that like this was just a couple years after Desperado, so this was like the start of his like American career, especially being in like more family friendly films. Like this was kind of his first like family action movie, family movie.
Is this PG-13?
This is PG-13. Yeah. Like I definitely remember watching this with my family, but I remember I don't remember the overall plot. I just know he's not the original Zorro. Anthony Hopkins plays the original Zorro, and then it's like 20-year time jump, and then he trains Antonio Banderas to be
I
a
hardly
Mexican Zorro.
remember anything.
That's all I remember. I remember there's a white guy in there that we're supposed to dislike.
I mean, it's a Western.
Yeah, essentially.
So that's probably like realistically all there is to it.
Yeah. But I'm actually really excited about this one. We've talked about doing this one at least 3 or 4 times over the last couple of years, and we were just going through, I think it was Paramount Plus, and we saw that it was ending July 31st. We're like, well, we might as well do it now.
Might as well.
I'm kind of excited. I remember really, really liking this movie.
I don't remember if I liked it or disliked it. I think I just kind of let it wash over me.
Yeah. Well, let's let it wash over, and then we'll come back and think about it critically in just a bit.
All right.
He defied the law and became a legend.
Zorro was a servant of the people. He did what was needed.
Now he's needed again.
Now he will train the next generation.
This is going to take a lot of work.
And avenge his past.
Tell her who her real father is.
The truth dies with me.
Antonio Banderas, Anthony Hopkins, The Mask of Zorro, rated PG-13.
All right, we're back. We just watched Zorro. But before we get into it, we're going to have Katrina have a sip of her LaCroix. Not a sponsor, but feel free to sponsor us, LaCroix.
Do they do advertising?
I don't know. They should, though. Yeah, I don't think they need to. Everybody knows LaCroix. But yeah, that's not what we're here to talk about, but feel free to sponsor us, LaCroix. But yeah, The Mask of Zorro, we'll tell you a little bit about how it got made, a little bit about the movie, and then we'll tell you our thoughts on it. So this was directed by Martin Campbell, who did GoldenEye. and Casino Royale. He also unfortunately did the
Unfortunately.
the Green Lantern movie, which was not very good.
Oh.
But this was written by Ted Elliott and Terry Rossio, who they've worked together on a bunch of things. They wrote most of the Shrek series, Aladdin, The Lone Ranger, and the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, as well as the 1998 Godzilla. So a lot of movies in our
Dang,
wheelhouse.
they make bank.
Small Soldiers, which I know you haven't seen, but that was one of my favorite movies as a kid. Had a pretty big budget for 1998, and essentially, like you said, I think you referred to this movie as kind of like a Western at the top of the episode.
Yeah.
$95 million budget on this movie. Made $250 million. Rotten Tomatoes score really solid, 83% from critics, and an audience pretty solid score from the audience at 73%. And this was like the 4th of July weekend movie. It came out July 7th, 1998.
Very nice. In October 1992, TriStar Pictures and Steven Spielberg's Amblin Entertainment hired Joel Gross to write the script after they were impressed with his adaptation of Disney's The Three Musketeers. Spielberg was set to be producer and possibly direct. In 1993, TriStar entered pre-production, creating early promotion for the film that same month at the Show West trade show. By December 93, Branko Lustig was producing the film with Spielberg, and Michael Salomon was attached as the director. In August 1994, Sean Connery was cast as Don Diego de...
Wild.
What?
Wild. Sean Connery.
I know, that's so bizarre. Sean Connery was cast as Don Diego de la Vega, while Salomon stated that the rest of the major cast would be Hispanic or Latino. Huh. How generous. The first chosen for the role of Zorro in the young version was Andy Garcia, a fashionable Latino actor at the time. Colombian singer Shakira was considered to play Elena, but turned it down due to her limited acting experience and poor English skills at the time. Still would have been great. She would have done just fine.
She would have looked great.
Just
at the very
fine. Least. Connery and Salomon eventually dropped out, and in September 1995, Robert Rodriguez, fresh off success of Desperado, signed to direct with Antonio Banderas, who had also starred in Desperado, playing the title role. TriStar and Amblin had been surprised by Rodriguez's low-budget filming techniques for his action films El Mariachi and Desperado, and shifted away from their initial plans with Salomon to make a big budget version of Zorro. Spielberg had hoped Rodriguez would start filming in January 1996 for a Christmas release date, but that start date was pushed back to July. The release date was later moved to Easter 97, and Rodriguez pulled out of the film in June 96 over difficulties coming to terms with TriStar on the budget. Banderas remained in the production, and Martin Campbell signed on later that month, turning down a chance to direct Tomorrow Never Dies after his success with relaunching the Bond character in GoldenEye. The principal photography for the film began in Mexico on January 27, 97, on a $60 million budget. Production stalled for 4 days in February when the director, Martin Campbell, was hospitalized for bronchitis. Anybody got time for that? Sony sent David Foster to join the project as producer to help fill the void left by Steven Spielberg and Walter F. Parks and Laurie MacDonald, who were busy running DreamWorks. In December, the producers were frustrated by customs agents when props and some other items, including Zorro's plastic sword, were held for 9 days. All these delays and issues caused the film to go $10 million over budget. During the post-production phase, Spielberg and Campbell decided that Diego de la Vega's death in the arms of his daughter was too depressing to be the ending, where Alejandro and Elena are happily married with their infant son was added 3 months after filming had ended, raising the budget another $3 million in interest costs as the film was delayed again. The Mask of Zorro was initially set for release on December 19th, 97, before the release date was changed to March 98. There was speculation within the media about whether TriStar changed the date in an attempt to avoid competition with Titanic. That's the move. In reality, Zorro had encountered production problems that extended its shooting schedule. In addition, Sony Pictures Entertainment, TriStar's parent company, wanted an action film for its first quarter releases of 98. The release date was once again pushed back, this time to July 98. That is insane.
Yeah, it's insane. So yeah, I read a little bit into that budget situation with Robert Rodriguez in the studio. He wanted like $45 million to do this movie. The studio offered him like $37 million, and then he actually went down and said he could do it for 42. And then like they only offered him $41 million. Like they couldn't just give him the extra million, so he walked. So yeah, so then it ended up
That's
going to Martin
insane.
Campbell, and then they immediately raised the budget
That
to
had to
60
be like
million.
a personality conflict
I'm sure there was
to
because
walk
they
at
got
that point and have them like just be like, no, okay, well, fine.
after he was in
Go
well,
ahead.
and Antonio Banderas stuck around.
That's so petty.
Well, and then the budget immediately goes up to 60 million with Martin Campbell. Now that being said, Martin Campbell had directed some bigger budget stuff like GoldenEye, which was just very successful. So I get them being willing to risk a little bit more money with him, which leads into the legacy of this film. So this film opened to generally favorable reviews, highlighting Antonio Banderas' performance as well as the stunt choreography and the action sequence in general. Roger Ebert said, it's a reminder of the days when stunts and special effects were integrated into the stories rather than the other way around. And he hailed The Mask of Zorro as possibly the best Zorro movie ever made.
Okay, well, Roger Ebert is a little hyperbolic and apparently hasn't seen Zorro the Gay Blade.
Yeah, which we've covered. Go back and check that episode. That was a fun movie to watch. This movie was nominated for various awards from the BAFTAs and the Academy Award, mainly for technical stuff like sound mixing and costuming. But it was nominated for multiple MTV Movie Awards, including Best Breakout Female Performance with Catherine Zeta-Jones.
Okay, but
And-
did it win Best Kiss?
No, it was not nominated for that. It was also nominated for Best Fight.
It wasn't nominated for Best Kiss.
Nope,
I mean, was there like a really good?
not really.
Kiss?
It was a really awkward
no,
open mouth
just
kiss.
like just a rapey shedding of clothing.
Yeah. Oh, well, there's also that same fight scene. He like kisses her multiple times. Like he gets her in like a lock and then like kisses her against the wall. I mean, they were like flirt fighting, and that's I'm glad you bring up that scene because that was, like I said at the beginning, that was like the money shot of the trailer, and that's the scene that everybody talked about at the time. But it was
That's
also
much to put in a trailer.
yeah. But a lot of people called this one of the most erotic scenes of the 90s.
I feel like the trailer kind of shows all the best parts of the movie.
Oh, I'm sure it did. So perfect segue. I'll do a quick summary and then we'll get into it. So late or I think it was like 1810 or something like that. It was like the early 1800s. Spain is unfortunately for them, fortunately for the native populations of Mexico and California, Spain, lost the war, so they were going to be, pulling out of California and Mexico, and the governor was going to have to give up his power. This was Don Rafael Montenegro, and he decides to kind of stick it to the people of Mexico and California one more time by just executing 3 random men as a trap for Zorro. Zorro wins the day. He rescues everybody, but Montenegro figures out that Zorro is actually Don de la Vega, and steals his daughter, and his guards accidentally kill his wife, and he puts him in prison for 20 years, where we fast forward 20 years later.
It's Don Diego de la Vega.
Don Diego de la Vega is in prison for 20 years, and Antonio Banderas plays Alejandro Murrieta, and he is a bandit who witnesses his brother get killed by Montenegro's right-hand man, an American soldier, and decides that he wants revenge, and he stumbles across De La Vega, who is not a young man anymore. He can't fight the battles as much, so he decides to take Alejandro under his wing and train him to be the new Zorro.
Dun, dun, dun.
The straight blade.
The straight blade. The aggressively heterosexual blade.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, I mean, I thought this movie opened really strong. Like like we mentioned, the reviews say the action sequences are really great. It starts off really strong, and I was really impressed with Anthony Hopkins doing a lot of this stuff. But it's like a really creative fight scene that opens it up, where he's rescuing these 3 random men that are going to get killed just because the governor's pissed that he doesn't get to control Mexico and California anymore. But he does this thing where he like is on the gallows. He's fighting like 3 guys, and he activates the lever, and then he drops through the gallows, and then does a flip over the edge, and then like pokes a guy in the butt and stuff like that, and then he's like hanging off of ledges and stuff and using the whip, and it was like really, really great choreography that like really used the set and the architecture and everything, and it just was like really organic, but still a little over the top, but it worked.
It was, and I feel like every single fight was way over the top and theatrical and melodramatic in the best way possible.
Yeah.
I love that it really is the meat of the movie. I mean, like, you could criticize it in that way, like the plot really is kind of secondary, and
Yeah.
it's like taking brutal, bloody history and kind of toning it down, which is an odd choice.
Yeah, which is interesting because there are actually a few real life figures in this movie.
Right. That was like so interesting to me that they took something that like is inherently kind of a violent character and violent stories, and they toned down the real aspect of it and then replaced it with this like theatrical, melodramatic presentation of the violence.
Right.
I mean, like, it's what the audience was ready for at the time, I guess. But like, if you were to do that today, holy crap, you would not do well.
What's interesting, and I'm kind of surprised that they did it this way, because Antonio Banderas plays Alejandro Murrieta, who's the brother of was it Manuel?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Manuel Murrieta, who was actually a real bandit around at that time, who was a thorn in the side of the Spanish, and he.
Well, no, Joaquin was who Zorro is based
Joaquin.
off
That's
of.
what I meant.
Yeah.
I said Manuel.
Yeah.
Let's go back.
Joaquin Murrieta.
Yeah. So Joaquin Murrieta is an actual person, an actual bandit from that time, who was a thorn in the sides of the Spanish. You know, almost like a Mexican Robin Hood kind of character.
Well, at the time, there were so many different groups that were kind of holding land in these different areas that, I mean, like, they all had just as much of a non-claim to it as anyone else.
Absolutely. But that was a real life character, or not character, a real life person. It would have been that Zorro was based off of, and it would have been interesting if they made him Zorro, and they should have had Antonio Banderas be him. But instead, they kill him. Now, the guy died in real life by the actual character who killed him. It was also a real person. Captain Harrison Love was a real American soldier in that era at the time, and he actually killed Murrieta, cut off his head, and his friend, the three-fingered Jack. In real life, he was Hispanic. He was not a white man, but he actually did cut off his hand and his head and preserve it, like in this movie. So they made him have a younger brother, Alejandro, who became Zorro. So it's interesting that they had the basis for Zorro in the movie, but didn't make him Zorro.
It is interesting.
One of the other things that I thought was interesting about this in the beginning of the movie is there's stuff that comes back around. So when Montenegro shows up at De La Vega's house, and we're in the middle of De La Vega telling stories about Zorro to his daughter, and that that comes back around later. But we also see Baby Banderas. His character is there in that final battle of Zorro as a kid, and then it comes back around, and there's an ambulance, and that's why they figure it all out. So this movie sets up a lot of stuff at the beginning, and I think it really, really does pay off. But I'm trying to think where I want to go.
I mean, there's so many different things that do come back that you probably don't notice unless you're really like paying attention. And I think they do that to reinforce these little Easter eggs for the audience. It's kind of assuming the worst of your audience, that they're not intelligent enough to pick up these things the first time they see it. Like, and they're all a little bit heavy-handed. So you see Elena as a baby, and her father is, telling her stories, and he has flowers in his hand. And then later, when she comes back to California with her father, they greet her with flowers.
And she recognizes them.
She recognizes the scent, and they say, oh, well, they only grow in California, so there's no way you could have before.
Right.
And that's like when Don Diego de la Vega actually sees her for the first time, and we know from that little exchange there that that's his daughter.
Right.
But then they bring it up again.
Because like a random villager tells her, you're definitely from here, your father was a Don.
And then the flowers come into play later, because then Zorro's actually holding them in the end when he has his and Elena's baby. So. Well,
that stuff was really heavy-handed, but even like some of the action stuff, I was really surprised. There's a training montage in this. It's actually a pretty solid training montage.
Right.
But there's like this weird kind of like ropes course in the cave where he's training, where he does these things where like there's ropes that are at like 45-degree angles, and there's ones that are, you know, upright and all these different angles, and he has to like jump over one, swing back around, and, you know, do some acrobatics through these ropes. And we know Zorro's an acrobatic fighter. He's always been in all these movies. He's like swinging on banisters and stuff like that. But at the end of the movie, there's a point where they're on this like rope elevator that's being suspended, and he like does the same like routine where he spins around the ropes and jumps around and like he's able to jump off the elevator before it crashes, kind of thing. But that I thought was really funny because like I made a joke about it during the montage, and I'm like, I bet those ropes are gonna come in handy later. And then sure enough, he does exactly that. And at the end, I'm like, yep, I was right. I'm glad it paid off at the end. Any highlights for you, you know, before we start moving on in the movie?
That was kind of a highlight for me, just how generally heavy-handed everything had to be. And I kind of forgot that was a thing that 90s movies did, that were kind of a little bit more family-oriented, trying to offer something for everyone.
Yeah.
They had to make it as obvious as possible, because you've got so many different ways of thinking in those kinds of audiences versus if your target demographic is much narrower. So it took like really big swings, and it just had to kind of like hedge its bets with some stuff that ended up playing as really cheesy and campier than we were already expecting from a Western.
I think that's fair. But
it does have like, you know, that nostalgic campiness of Westerns, and in some ways that's fun. I'm glad that it doesn't have any kind of derogatory presentation of Native Americans, which is a refreshing departure from Westerns.
No, absolutely.
And kind of a rare exception.
No, absolutely. One of the things that I thought was pretty funny. This is a little nitpicky for me. He trained really fast. So this whole movie, you know, it's supposed to be 20 years afterwards. We don't really know how long they're training, but I would imagine it was a couple of weeks. But at the beginning of the montage, you know, he does some really impressive flourishes. Like, it looks like he's held a sword before, and then Zorro just like taps the sword and it like falls out of his hand.
Okay, so wait, where are you going with this? Was there more?
There's a little bit more. So he gets through the montage, and like every other montage, by the end of it, he bests the trainer and everything. And then he's like, well, you're almost ready. Now I got to train you to be a gentleman. But we don't see any of that training.
Right.
He just like, next scene, he's pretending to be, you know, a Don. But there's a scene.
They're a little over for time.
Yeah. But there's a scene, you know, like you mentioned, it's mainly action sequences. I do disagree with Roger Ebert a little bit that the action sequences were integrated into the story. I think it's more action. The story was loosely fitted around it.
Right.
They did a great job integrating it, but there's like this scene where he's not quite Zorro yet. He's done all the combat training, but he goes and steals a horse because they see this horse while they're going around town
love that scene.
doing some like just doing some reconnaissance, but the horse changes color like 4 times in like a 10-second clip.
Okay, well, first of all, he thinks he can just like horse whisper his way through this situation. The horse doesn't know him.
No.
He just walks on into the stable, and he like tells the horse he's like giving it the honor of being his horse.
Like it understands.
And he's basically just, I'm gonna take you and you're gonna like it. You're welcome.
To be fair, they had a meet cute
and
at
then
the
it
market.
kind of like threw him around the room for a little while, which is nice.
Well, then they ended up, but they have this like big fight scene, and like he gets, you know, like all the guards in the town come, and there's one giant guard who's like 7 feet tall, and he has to use cannonballs to like knock some sense in this guy, and then he spits out all of his teeth. And then, you know, he fights a bunch of the rest of the guys. He inadvertently sets the barn and everything on fire. Then he has to go hide in the church because he made like a huge spectacle, and that's where we have like the meet cute with Elena, and you know that's a pretty good confessional scene. We might want to go back to that. But then he goes back. OG Zorro kind of like chastises him, and he's just like, "You told me that I need to go become Zorro, and here I go being Zorro, and you get mad at me." And then he goes like, "All right, you're right. You need to be a gentleman now." And then all of a sudden, the rest of the movie, like he's an incredible fighter and like doesn't mess up at all.
Right.
Like that I thought that was a little odd how he progressed so fast. He fumbles around his like first mission that he gives himself, but as soon as OG Zorro signs off on him, he's like a perfect fighter.
Yeah, he's somehow amazing after just a few weeks, whereas Elena has supposedly been training in her sword fighting since she was
like
4.
Yeah, so 16 years. She's
So,
supposed to be
like,
20.
I don't buy that. Is Zorro supposed to have... Is he imbued with some mystical sword fighting ability that just made him better than other people?
If you ask...
it depends on the source material.
Yeah. Well, if you ask the choreographer of the movie, Antonio Banderas was a natural talent.
Oh, yeah. He's insane.
So,
he's, like, great about doing his own stunts. And it really, really paid off in this film because there's so much that just would not have looked as beautiful as it does with the choreography if they were cutting between him and stunts.
There were some long cuts and long takes on this, and you can tell it was Antonio Banderas doing it. So he really wanted to do most of his own stunts. So he actually trained before his training was officially supposed to start with this movie. He trained with the Spanish Olympic fencing team for 4 months.
That's crazy.
I thought, and because Antonio Banderas has played so many roles in like Mexican cinema and Desperado.
He trained with Bob Anderson, who had trained Errol Flynn.
Yeah, and then he also trained a lot of people during the Lord of the Rings movies too. But yeah, Antonio Banderas, I thought he was Mexican, but he's actually from Spain. I didn't know that. But he trained with the Spanish Olympic team for 4 months, and then he started his official training with Bob, and they did another 2 months, 10 hours a day, and Bob said that he was the most gifted natural swordsman he had ever met.
That sounds so fun.
There are actually a couple fencing classes in Los Angeles, and I've actually been interested in doing it, especially after watching, we watch I Love You Man all the time, and like Paul Rudd's character's into fencing, but I just feel like it'd be too expensive, so I haven't actually looked into it.
It's pretty amazing how much you see Anthony Hopkins actually do, because he refused the part originally because
he needed back surgery.
Yeah, and he was able to have like laser back surgery that enabled him to take the role.
Rich.
At the time, that wasn't really accessible to everyone.
Well, what's funny is like, we kind of scoffed at the fact that they were going to do Sean Connery initially, because it's a similar role. He played a Spaniard in Highlander.
But it kind of works for this. So all the Spaniards have British accents because they have to differentiate between them and then the white people that are in California already, like Three-Fingered Jack.
Right.
Because he's got this kind of like American Western accent, more typical of Westerns. And then
Harrison Love, the Colonel.
Everyone else's accents is just kind of like a mishmash.
Yeah.
They speak Spanglish. Sometimes they speak in Spanish. Sometimes they speak in English. Sometimes they just have random exclamations in Spanish.
Right.
Ay, bendito. No, they don't do that. That's from Daddy Yankee.
What's funny, like in my notes, Harrison Love, the main foil to Antonio Banderas, because he killed his brother. I called all my notes refer to him as not Kiefer Sutherland, because I didn't hear his name. I didn't notice it until the credits. So yeah, not Kiefer Sutherland is is in this, because he looks uncanny to 90s, late 80s, early 90s Kiefer Sutherland. Just throwing that out there.
Kiefer. While we were still on stunts, I had another stunts note.
Yeah, give me that note.
Oh, like while we're talking about stunts, Martin Campbell didn't want to use Zorro's famous whip. Because, the character's kind of famous for using that bullwhip on pretty much everything. But Anthony Hopkins felt that the whip was important. So he practiced daily. He learned how to use the whip and persuaded Campbell to film certain tricks with it.
Yeah, he did the famous thing where you like blow out candles with the whip.
It looks great.
Yeah, he did a good job.
It's a fun gag.
I wonder if him and Michelle Pfeiffer have ever like traded secrets on the whip, because she did all of her whip work.
You think they go to a dungeon together on the weekends?
Maybe that'd be cool. Good for them.
Everyone needs a good hobby.
One of the other anything else with the stunts? That last time, maybe we should talk about some action sequences. Let's make sure we're done. That final action sequence at the mine.
Oh my god!
There's so much going on. He's zip lining, he's doing flippy flips, he's hanging off of elevators. There's explosions. And it's all really, really good. He does this like zip line while he's like snowboarding with a shovel.
Oh wait, I had one more stunts note.
Go for it. We're talking stunts still.
The swords they used for filming were made of aluminum, so they produced like really loud clanking sounds, and it just didn't sound sexy enough. So they had to dub the clinks and clanks of the swords.
Oh, that would have been
every
cool for the Foley artist.
single fight scene. Like, holy crap. That is so much work.
I mean, that makes sense. Don't they have to do that generally? Because a lot of times they're just using rubber swords anyway.
I mean, most of the time there's nothing there, but to have to like sample to take out the audio and then replace it with something else. And there are a lot of scenes where you see hundreds of swords going at the same time.
Yeah, there's quite a bit of that. Because we're on the action scenes, we can discuss the end and then we'll get back to it. But there's a part where at the final battle, Zorro comes out on top. He stabs Harrison Love. Harrison Love's just kind of like, oh man, I'm still alive, but I'm in a lot of pain. And then the elevator shaft with crates full of gold falls on him and pummels him.
It's
he
brutal.
Did not die instantly.
Right?
On
No,
that.
He would have just been like crushed and bleeding internally.
It gave me the vibe, and it made me really sad because it's my favorite character in The Walking Dead, and I never really recovered from it. But when Glenn gets killed, he gets like bludgeoned by a bat, and he's still kind of like kicking for a few seconds, and he's like talking, and he's like I just imagine that guy doing this and just being like gasping for air as both his lungs are collapsed. I was like, God, that sucks. What a shitty way to go.
That would be exactly how it went. He was such a good villain.
He was
this
great.
Whole film, like, it had every single great villain. I loved it.
The performances were all great. Like, I think everybody did a really good job. I think Antonio Banderas killed it. But the story element was just really, really weak. It's just like, okay, to get out of to help out his homies, and the governor gave a bunch of land to his crew, the other Dons, so that way, because he's just like, it's kind of lawless out here. The United States, Mexico will honor you.
That's
guys
how my ancestors got their land. That's exactly it.
So they were just like, the people will maintain that you guys own it because it's private. You guys aren't working for the government anymore. And then they just decide, oh, well, Mexico's is having a war and they need to pay for it. Well, we'll just steal a bunch of gold from the mines that they don't realize are here and buy Mexico from them. And like, that is the story.
Yep.
Like, that's it. And it's like, we see, I think it would have been a little bit more interesting if there was a little bit more time for Marietta to, kind of schmooze the Don. Because he goes to like one party and he just says like, hey, the queen knows it wasn't your fault. And the guy's like, hey, you can hang. And like invites him over, and he's like, oh, by the way, we've got like a mine that we've been secretly mining using slave labor, and we're going to buy Mexico from Mexico using their own gold. Don't tell anybody, bro. And he's just like, cool. And then like, the Love just is like, you kind of look like the guy whose brother I killed. And he's just like, I'm going to kill you. And then he's just like, well, this isn't good. And then somehow he found time to like sneak some smooches in with Elena, and then it's just like the end of the movie.
Yeah,
it just rips.
So New Zorro watches his brother get killed.
Correct.
And then he drinks the head juice.
Correct.
Why?
He had to keep his cover.
It would have smelled so horrible. There's no way you would have been able to swallow that.
Back then, everything smelled terrible, though.
We need to flesh out the scene. So, what's that white guy's name?
Captain Love.
So Captain Love asks to speak with him in his office, and he just like has his brother's head in a pitcher. And is it his brother's hand too?
No,
it was the other guy's hand.
It was Jack's hand.
It was Jack's hand in like
another
cup.
jar. Yeah, like a mason jar.
And our hero takes a swig of it, and it wasn't even that he was like poured a glass from it. Like, he dips this cup in himself into the pitcher, and then takes a sip of his dead brother's head tea.
He had to maintain his cover.
Okay, but like, even if that wasn't his brother and that was just some random guy, like, why would you do that?
Honey,
How do you not puke?
They put like snakes and scorpions and stuff. They're used to putting dead things in their liquor.
That probably would have killed him. All the bacteria that would have been in that.
No, it was preserved.
Oh,
no, it was totally fine.
I hated that.
Probably tasted real good.
That was stupid.
Keep your family close.
Ew. Yeah, that was a bit of a stretch for me. And the relationship between the two Zorros, like the older one, okay, first of all, the younger one shows up and he's like not trying to lay low at all.
No.
He's harassing people in the street. He's getting drunk with like no plan for what he's gonna do.
Nope, he's an idiot.
And old Zorro just happens to be in the right place at the right time.
Sees the amulet.
And like he sees the amulet and then just decides that this is his homeboy. But then he seems, and maybe this is just like the difference in their performance styles, because I think Banderas has a little bit more flourish and he's just a little bit more theatrical.
Well, they did that a little bit on purpose because they also changed the Zorro costume for him. So because he's supposed to be Mexican, the newer Zorro costume has more Mexican flair. And
whereas the old one was kind of like a traditional Andalusian costume.
So I think that could be just, it's a different culture, it's different, younger. I mean, the other Zorro, even 20 years prior, was still an older dude. Like he was in his like he was too old to be Zorro the last time he was Zorro, let alone 20 years later.
I do like that they kept the fact that Zorro smiles while he fights.
Yeah, it's a staple,
which can be like really freaking creepy.
Yeah, it gets into the minds of the people he's fighting, where it looks like, I'm not having any difficulty doing this. This is fun.
Right. So for me, like, it seemed like old Zorro was, I mean, in some ways he was bored. He was defeated. But he was kind of like condescending in his approach and in the way that he gave information and help and advice. But he was like almost bored and condescending to the point where you're not sure if he's fully invested in the younger guy's success.
Rich. I mean, I think it comes from, there's a cultural difference in Spain, Mexico, but also Antonio Banderas' version was a bandit and basically a homeless person, and he's
a vagrant.
He was a vagrant, and De La Vega was a don. Like he was a one percenter kind of thing. So there is that, and then also we do see. I didn't remember this plot point, and I was actually kind of disappointed by it at the end. And I think part of the end is not earned because when we figure out what's going on, Antonio Banderas' version, new Zorro, Neuro. He decides, or he figures out the plot. He steals the map. He finds out that there's this mine, and they're going to blow up the mine and kill all the workers, so that way Mexico never finds out that they were swindled.
Right. Okay, but who are the workers going to tell?
Mexico. But they decide to, they're going to kill everyone.
It just seems like an odd move to give a crap about potential complications from people you've already subjugated.
I don't remember what they said, something about it, like they were going to find out because the General Santa Anna was going to be coming, and there was no chance that they wouldn't see the mine, so they had to blow it up, something like that. But new Zorro finds this out, and he's a good dude. Like he has his revenge plot, and he proves that he really should be Zorro because he's willing to put his revenge plot on hold for a minute to go save all these people. And so he goes to OG Zorro, and OG Zorro's like, cool, you've proven yourself, you're Zorro now, go take care of it. I'm going to go dip and take care of my revenge. And Zorro's like, new Zorro's like, are you kidding me? Like, you told me I couldn't go kill my dude. Like, I've had so many opportunities where I could have killed not Kiefer Sutherland. Mm-hmm. And you keep telling me, no, you made me go undercover. You made me drink my brother's head tea because I had to be undercover. I had to smile with him. I had to go to a party and dance with him. And then you're just going to go and abandon me when we actually have a real mission to help the people of Mexico.
He was too creepy at the party.
Right. So he goes, and at this point, Anthony Hopkins, OG Zorro, goes to the mansion and, puts a sword to Montanero's throat and is like, Catherine Zeta-Jones is my daughter. Tell her. And then he, ends up getting arrested because they're willing to shoot the daughter. And it's just like,
right, how does he flip that quickly?
Right, so he does that. And
was that really the long game, and he was just playing her this whole time?
Right, so he's so she goes and rescues him and gets him out, and they help Antonio Banderas in the finale. But he's not all that heroic. He was willing to let Antonio Banderas realistically die doing that on his own, and not save the hundreds of people. He said, I gave my life for them. I shouldn't have to do it again. He was kind of about it. And goes in, he had to go tell his daughter and everything. And then at the end, he does get killed. He gets fatally wounded. And the movie was originally going to end with him dying in Catherine Zeta-Jones' arms. It didn't test well, so they added the prologue.
It's too depressing.
Or the epilogue. epilogue. With the child, which I think made the movie better. It bookends it because we see it, but like I don't feel like that ending is truly earned for Anthony Hopkins, because even during the big finale, he only fought Montanero and let Antonio Banderas fight hundreds of faceless goons, and then he does show up at the end and prevents Montanero from shooting him. But it's like all he did was fight Montanero. He didn't really help. He wasn't that heroic at the end.
It's the legendary Zorro, not the noble Zorro.
Yeah, that's true. And then at the end of the movie, because he had to get his revenge, he did take off the mask. He was like, "You were right. I was that guy's brother."
Right.
But like hundreds and hundreds of people saw Antonio Banderas. They're gonna know how handsome and sexy and who his wife is. Like, they're gonna know all this. Like, there's a sequel that came out 7 years later. I've only seen the sequel one time, so I don't really remember it, but I don't see how Zorro's a secret 7 years from now.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. The only thing that makes sense is like everyone knows, but no one really cares because he's the hero.
Right.
I think that's about it.
It ended with a what was very in style at the time. And to be fair, Martin Campbell did direct GoldenEye, or the 007 movies normally kind of do this at the front of the movie with like, looking down the barrel and shooting down the barrel of the gun kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But this had a thing that was very much like Batman and Robin and Batman Returns, which both had come out prior to this, where at the end of the movie, the hero walks across the screen, looks down and starts running and does like kind of a flourish. Like, it really reminded me of the Joel Schumacher Batmans at the end, because he just like walks down, looks dead center of the screen, makes a Z slash and fire, and then it's just like, and then cuts to a top 40 song for the ballad for the credits.
It really did play like a superhero film.
It did. Like, this could have been any 90s superhero movie, early 2000s, pretty much any superhero movie before MCU.
Absolutely. I think like this was kind of when they were refining that perfect formula for an action like crowd pleaser film.
Yeah, because I mean, this was before Spider-Man, this was before X-Men, and to be fair, a lot of superheroes are based off of Zorro. Like, Batman was based off of Zorro, and that's why Batman traditionally is seeing a Zorro film the night that his parents are killed.
Can you imagine if Spielberg had directed and he had gotten his pick? Tom Cruise.
For
Zorro.
Was that who it was?
Yeah, that's...
I saw a bunch of other people.
Apparently, Spielberg was being sought to direct, and at the time, he wanted Tom Cruise.
That's bizarre.
It is bizarre.
Because I saw like Andy Garcia on multiple people's lists as, because he was up and coming at the time. It was pre-Ocean's 11. Although, like, I don't think he would have been good. I like him a lot, but Andy Garcia always just kind of, to me, was like a 50-year-old man.
Yeah,
and I just watched him in Father of the Bride for Remake Rewind, and like, I don't think he looks much older than he did in 2001.
No, he's aged very well.
He looks almost identical to the way he did in 2001 in Ocean's 11. So I don't know, man. I'm just gonna go through my notes real quick and see if there's anything else I can think of. No, my big note at the end is I don't think De La Vega was really all that heroic. Like, I feel like his legacy is kind of tarnished by the end because he was just a stubborn old man and like didn't actually care about the people.
I mean, but are any of them like really that noble? Like, what is their objective?
So his objective was just to get...
Zorro was like just trying to get out of his captivity.
No, the new Zorro really just wanted to kill Love. He didn't care about
but
anything
initially
else. Yeah,
initially he was just trying to get out of his captivity.
But he also is somebody who was, desperate, had no other options, everything. Like, he was the lowest of the low.
He's just like in survival mode pretty much the entire film.
But as soon as he has any kind of agency and he has the power, he immediately is willing to give up his revenge for the greater good. Like, he's convinced that he's convinced by OG Zorro that his revenge needs to be sent. He will get it, but there's a bigger plot at hand and they need to figure it out. And even at the end of the movie, he goes and rescues all the people first and stops the explosion before getting his revenge. Like, he was a good dude. Like, Zorro, new Zorro, was actually a good person. He just needed, we talk about it a lot. Like, they say, and this number's probably too old now, but back in the day, like 10 years ago, they said $75,000 a year is the point where people can start to be happy and not have to worry about things. All he needed was a little bit of a pick-me-up so he doesn't have to be fighting for survival, and he became a great person and a productive member of society.
Yep.
So I think he was a good dude. But not De La Vega. Screw him.
Damn.
Yeah, I like Anthony Hopkins, but like I was really surprised that like I didn't find him to be likable by the end of the day. I liked his character less and less as the movie progressed.
Well, and he would have been completely ineffectual if his plot to escape prison, which was faking dead, had not worked.
Right.
Like, that's how he gets out.
Yeah.
He fakes dead, and then Love comes in and is like, get that out of here before it starts to stink.
Yeah.
And that's how he escapes from prison.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, that's basically just taken from the Count of Monte Cristo.
I've never actually seen that or read it.
Oh, really?
No, I haven't.
That's how, what's his name?
Henry Cavill?
Dantes? Or I guess well, no, I think there's an accent over the E. The main character escapes that way.
Got it.
Yep.
Was that Henry Cavill or was that Guy Pearce?
I have no idea. I've never seen it. I've only read it.
So let's just answer the question. Did this ruin your childhood?
No, I think it definitely altered my perspective about this movie. I don't know if it's something that I would have considered particularly family friendly, but somehow it very much was presented as a family friendly film.
It was a family romp. I'm
there are
torn.
some things that are problematic, like the scene where they're flirt fighting and he cuts her clothes off. Because on one hand, it's like, yeah, that's horrifically aggressive and scary and not okay, but at the same time they were like both pursuing each other and like not really fighting.
They weren't trying to hurt each other.
It was just like it was a weird kinky thing.
Their chemistry was really good though, like that dance scene as well. Like
they did have really good chemistry.
That dance scene was pretty hot too.
I'm glad it was her and not Salma Hayek or Penelope Cruz, who were both considered for the role.
Yeah,
it's refreshing as well because she looks like she could be 20. She was 29 or 28.
She was 28
when they filmed this.
Yeah.
She looked great, but usually you're casting someone a lot younger. I mean, by contrast, we get Keira Knightley pretty much on the heels of that, and she was like 17 in the first Pirates film.
No, I think she was a little older than that.
I think she was 17.
She was very young.
She was a teenager.
Yeah, she was like 18 or 19.
So it was nice to see, a woman approaching 30 playing a 20-year-old.
Yeah, that was surprising.
Instead of, a 16-year-old.
Yeah, for me, I'm on the fence. Like, I actually was really excited. I've been wanting to cover this for a couple of years. I was actually really excited about watching this because I remember really enjoying it. And I liked the action was actually better than I thought it was going to be. Like, I was expecting to be cheesy 90s. The action was fantastic. Like, I kind of want to watch the 2005 sequel to see if the action's still there because I legitimately like the action.
The practical effects were fantastic.
The story was a little lacking. The performances were all fantastic. I don't think there was a bad performance in this film.
Okay, if you look at it as a Western, is the story really lacking? Or is it just a Western?
So as somebody who hated Westerns until Remake Rewind and
I hate
watched
Westerns.
No, there are some amazing Westerns now. Like there are a lot of bad, like the spaghetti Westerns aren't necessarily great, but there are some legitimately good Westerns and modern Westerns, like 3:10 to Yuma is fantastic. The remake of True Grit is legitimately one of the best movies ever made. Like, I think it's a fantastic movie. I've really gotten into Westerns over the last 5 years. So in some regards, like the action was much better. The story was but like I didn't really find any characters all that great. There's some good one line. Like I really like the confession scene.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was pretty funny, but it was like that scene was funny. I liked the action, but like I didn't feel like there was anything that really engaged me the whole movie.
Right.
So I'm torn. Like, I don't think in some ways this was better than I thought it was going to be, like the action.
I think I would have liked to see Robert Rodriguez's original pitch for the film, which was darker and rated R.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
That's what I want
That's
next.
what it would have been. But I thought this movie was beautifully shot, though, too. Like, the contrast, the color, like, it was composed really. Like, this was a good-looking movie. I think it was a mediocre movie that was packaged very well.
It's beautiful.
It's a beautiful movie.
It's shot beautifully. It's masterfully made.
And they shot on location in Mexico, which makes a big difference.
Yeah.
So, like, there's a lot of good elements to it.
It's actually set near Monterrey, right?
Right.
Because at the time, that would have been the capital.
Yeah. So, like, overall, I don't think this was a great movie. I didn't enjoy it as much as I know I enjoyed it when I was younger. But I don't think it was a bad... I think it's just kind of an movie.
Yeah.
Like, it's a very meh movie. So, it didn't ruin my childhood, but I don't feel necessarily validated. Like, I don't know if I'd ever watch this again.
Right. I could go a couple decades without watching it
I do
again.
want to watch the sequel just because, but that's about it.
I just, like, I'm a little conflicted because I do love the character, but I'm also, like, more interested in seeing different versions of Zorro. I'd love to see a newer version of Zorro through, like, an anti-colonialism lens. Now that that's an option in our society, I think that would be a lot more interesting if it was a little bit more honest.
I can't remember the name of the actor, but he was in everything when they wanted a Latin American guy who wasn't super famous. He was in the Che Guevara movie, The Motorcycle Diaries.
Garcia Bernal?
Yeah.
Gail?
He's supposed to be he's been tied to a Zorro movie for like 10 years.
Yeah, but he's like 4'5".
That, and then there was going to be one apparently like he was going to be one.
He's probably like 5'4".
Well, then they were going to do one that was set in the modern day kind of thing, and then they were going to do another one that was actually in the future. So like he's been tied to like 3 versions of Zorro for the last like 10-15 years. But I think now would be a good time to remake Zorro.
Well, yeah, and he's got that, like, kind of, like, little boy face still. Even now, how old is he now? He's 43 now.
Oh, I would have thought he was older, actually.
Oh, he's 5'7".
Okay.
Which means he's 5'4".
Tom Cruise height. No, I mean, that's it. I don't got anything else, though.
No, that's pretty much all I've got.
Yeah,
Didn't ruin our childhood.
If I had to say yes or no, I'm going to say no because I didn't hate it. It just wasn't as good as I remember.
I think that kind of counts as a yes.
Fine.
If it didn't hold up.
Yeah, but other things exceeded my expectations. Like that's the thing. Like the action exceeded my expectations.
That's
but
true.
Everything else. So like it's kind of a wash, like a draw. Like it just exists.
I feel like for me there were certain things that I was really impressed with, like action, 10 out of 10. Horse stunts, 10 out of 10.
Oh, the horse stunts were fantastic.
The horse stunts were insane.
Yeah.
And there were so many of them.
Yeah.
Just like watching them gives me anxiety because there's so much that can go wrong.
Yeah.
And like it's hard enough to set up a scene for stunts with your rigger and your stunt coordinator
what did you just say?
And your stunt actors. But if you add a horse to the mix, you're adding an actor who you can't fully communicate with.
Yeah. So, okay, let's break this down. So we say action, 10 out of 10. Stunts, 10 out of 10. We can link those together. Composition, cinematography. I'm going to say 10 out of 10. It looked really good. Character work, 10 out of 10. I thought the acting, the performances were great. I
think the romance, we all remember it being a little bit more because that saucy scene was in the trailer. So... like that influenced our memory of it a lot. But I think the romance between them should have been a lot more interesting.
It was a little rushed.
Yeah, it's kind of like, what is it that is attracting them to one another?
To
I mean,
be
like
fair,
she's obviously just a kink. But for him, like, what is it about her that is making this
hot, rich woman?
I guess.
I mean, let's be
really
fair.
Needs.
Antonio Banderas, 1998, Antonio Banderas with that long hair. That's peak Antonio.
Yeah.
He looked great.
He looked great.
Catherine Zeta-Jones looked great. I mean, if somebody was like, you want to watch them? You'd probably be interested in watching that.
Anyway, that was a little lacking for me. The plot was a little bit lacking.
So romance, 7 out of 10?
Yeah.
7 out of 10. Okay.
Historical references, maybe like 5 out of 10.
5 out of 10. That's fair.
I just want more meat there.
Meats. But you're
but I guess I want
roughly
more,
pescatarian.
More meat in all of those areas.
All right, let's wrap it up. Where can our listeners find you?
I'm all over the internet at Katrinosity.
Check out her YouTube. My social media is basically the podcast stuff, so you can check out MDXpods at MDXpods.com, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all at MDXpods. We're also on YouTube. Check us out. You can Google... you can search MDXpods, Remake Rewind, or Ruin My Childhood on YouTube, and we will pop up. Check it out. If you guys want to support the show, you can go to patreon.com/MDXpods, get early access, bonus episodes. We should do bonus episodes for the show. We should figure that out sometime. We only do bonus episodes for Remake Rewind right now, but we'll do something eventually. But that's it. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for
Bye.
listening.